In the heart of the medieval period, the Christian West and the Islamic East were bound by a shared, sacred geography. For centuries, this relationship was defined by trade and pilgrimage. But beginning in the late 11th century, it was violently transformed by a series of religious wars known as the Crusades. For over 200 years, waves of Christian knights, peasants, and nobles left their European homes, driven by a powerful mix of religious fervor, political ambition, and the promise of land and wealth. Their goal was to reclaim a holy land, especially the city of Jerusalem, from Muslim rule. The Crusades were far more than a simple clash of civilizations. They were a complex, brutal, and often opportunistic series of events that forever altered the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East and Europe. They created and destroyed kingdoms, strengthened the power of the papacy, and forged a legacy of mistrust that continues to resonate to this day. So, what were the specific causes of these holy wars? Who were the key figures who defined them? And what were the lasting, unintended consequences of an era defined by a clash of faith? The world before the Crusades. By the late 11th century, the political landscape of the Middle East was in flux. The vast Islamic world, while powerful and culturally rich, was politically fragmented. The Seljuk Turks, a Sunni Muslim dynasty originating from Central Asia, had recently expanded their empire, capturing much of Anatolia from the Byzantine Empire and taking control of Jerusalem. While early Muslim rulers had generally allowed Christian pilgrims access to the Holy Land, the Seljuks' expansion made this journey more difficult and dangerous, fueling a sense of outrage in Europe. At the same time, the Byzantine Empire, the inheritor of the Eastern Roman Empire, was a major power but was in a state of decline. It faced mounting pressure from the Seljuk Turks, who had defeated the Byzantine army at the pivotal Battle of Manzikert in 1071. Facing the potential collapse of his empire, Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos made a desperate plea to the West for military aid. In Western Europe, a feudal society was taking shape. The population was growing, and younger sons of the nobility often had little hope of inheriting land. The Catholic Church, with a reforming papacy, sought to assert its authority and unite the warring feudal lords of Europe under a common cause. The First Crusade, a call to arms and a bloody victory, the catalyst for the First Crusade, was the powerful rhetoric of Pope Urban II. In November 1095, at the Council of Clermont in France, the Pope delivered a famous sermon to a crowd of nobles and commoners. He called for a holy war to liberate the Holy Land, promising the remission of sins for all who took up the cross. "God wills it," became the rallying cry. The response was immediate and overwhelming. An initial, disorganized wave of peasants and commoners, led by charismatic figures like Peter the Hermit, set out in what became known as the People's Crusade. Ill-equipped and poorly led, this group committed violent pogroms against Jewish communities in Europe before being largely annihilated by the Seljuk Turks in Anatolia. The main force, known as the Prince's Crusade, was a more organized and disciplined army of feudal nobles and knights from across Western Europe. They traveled overland to Constantinople and then into Anatolia. Their journey was long and brutal, marked by starvation and attrition. The Crusaders' first major victory was the Siege of Antioch in 1098, a long and desperate struggle that saw the city's capture after months of fighting. From there, the Crusader army marched south to their ultimate destination, Jerusalem. In the summer of 1099, the Crusaders laid siege to the Holy City. After weeks of fighting, they breached the walls and captured Jerusalem. The victory was stained by a brutal massacre of its inhabitants, including Muslims, Jews, and even Eastern Orthodox Christians. With Jerusalem secured, the Crusaders established a series of 4 Latin Christian kingdoms in the Levant, the most important being the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The Crusader States and subsequent Crusades, the Crusader States, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Principality of Antioch, the County of Edessa, and the County of Tripoli were a precarious European presence in the heart of the Islamic world. To defend them, military religious orders were founded, such as the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller, who combined monastic vows with martial prowess. The Crusader States' existence was marked by constant conflict. In 1144, the Muslim leader Imad ad-Din Zengi captured the county of Edessa, prompting Pope Eugene III to call for the Second Crusade 1147 to 1149. This crusade, led by the monarchs of France and Germany, was a dismal failure. Plagued by infighting and poor leadership, its armies were soundly defeated by Muslim forces, and the crusade accomplished little. The political situation in the Levant shifted dramatically with the rise of the great Muslim general, Saladin. By the late 12th century, Saladin had unified the fragmented Muslim states of Egypt and Syria into a powerful empire. In 1187, his forces decisively defeated the Crusader army at the Battle of Hattin and, shortly after, recaptured Jerusalem. Saladin's recapture of Jerusalem, unlike the Crusaders' initial conquest, was marked by a remarkably humane surrender, allowing most Christians to leave peacefully. The news of Jerusalem's fall shocked Europe and prompted the most famous crusade of all, the Third Crusade 1189 to 1192, also known as the King's Crusade. It was led by 3 of Europe's most powerful monarchs, Richard I of England the Lionheart, Philip II of France, and Frederick I of the Holy Roman Empire. The crusade had mixed results. Frederick I drowned on the journey, and Philip II returned to France early. Richard the Lionheart, a brilliant military strategist, remained. He captured the city of Acre after a long siege and won a decisive victory against Saladin at the Battle of Arsif. However, he was unable to recapture Jerusalem itself. In 1192, Richard and Saladin negotiated a truce that allowed Christian pilgrims to visit Jerusalem, but left the city under Muslim control. The later Crusades and their diversions, the crusading era, continued well into the 13th century, but the focus began to shift away from the Holy Land. The Fourth Crusade 120 to 1204 is a prime example of this diversion. Intended to recapture Jerusalem, the Crusaders were instead led by Venetian merchants to the capital of their Christian ally, the Byzantine Empire. In a stunning betrayal, the Crusaders sacked Constantinople in 1204, a conquest that established the Latin Empire and permanently damaged the relationship between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox ex-churches. Other crusades were even more tragic or unusual. The Children's Crusade in 1212, while likely exaggerated by later accounts, speaks to the depth of religious fervor. Many of its young participants were sold into slavery. The Sixth Crusade 1228 to 1229 was led by Frederick II, the Holy Roman Emperor, who had been excommunicated by the Pope. Instead of fighting, Frederick used his diplomatic skills to negotiate a treaty with the Sultan of Egypt, Al-Kamil. For a short period, he successfully secured control of Jerusalem and other holy sites for Christians without a single battle. Ultimately, the Crusader States were a temporary political anomaly. The last major Christian stronghold in the Levant, the city of Acre, fell to the Mamluks in 1291. The fall of Acre marked the definitive end of the Crusader presence in the Holy Land and the conclusion of the major crusading campaigns. A mixed and lasting legacy, the Crusades had profound and often contradictory consequences for all involved. For Europe, the Crusades strengthened the power of the papacy and the nascent nation-states. They also brought European merchants into closer contact with the East, stimulating trade in spices, silks, and other goods. Crusaders returned with new ideas and knowledge, including advancements in Arab science, medicine, and philosophy. The Crusades also gave rise to the powerful military orders and strengthened the concept of holy war in European thought. For the Islamic world, initially seen as a nuisance, the Crusades ultimately led to a consolidation of Muslim power under unified leaders like Saladin. The experience hardened Muslim attitudes toward the Christian West, cementing an image of the Crusaders as brutal, foreign invaders. The legacy of this invasion continues to be a point of historical reference in modern political discourse. For the Byzantine Empire, the Crusades were a devastating blow. Far from helping, the Crusaders, particularly in the Fourth Crusade, weakened the Byzantine Empire, directly contributing to its eventual fall to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. The Crusades were a complex and often contradictory series of events, driven by a volatile mix of religious faith, political ambition, and economic necessity. They were not a simple story of good versus evil, but a defining moment in medieval history that forged a lasting legacy of bitterness, mistrust, and cultural exchange that continues to shape our world today.